But my question is, why? Why do we find film stories to be so fascinating? So I want to just start with a little conversation today. I want you to turn to somebody near you and just finish this sentence. I watch movies because, what would that be? So just turn to somebody and go. Talk about it. I watch movies because. It sounds like we have a pretty motivated movie crowd here. Now, there are lots of reasons we watch movies, because they're fun, they're entertaining. I like movies because stories change things. When I go into a movie, I expect to be touched. I want my heart to be blessed. I want to laugh. I want to cry. Sometimes I just want to escape. There are lots of reasons we watch movies, and we've been watching them for a long time. The modern movie industry was basically born in 1915 when a 3-hour feature film was released for the first time called The Birth of a Nation. It's kind of a racist movie. I don't recommend it. But it was the birth of Hollywood as well as the birth of a nation. And it started the movie industry rolling. In fact, 15 years later, there were 129 million people in the United States at the end of the 20s. 90 million people were going to see movies every week. Can you believe that? The vast majority of the American population were weekly moviegoers in the 1920s. Pretty amazing. And we still watch lots of media. And frankly, stories change things. They have impact. In fact, sometimes more impact than we ever imagined. For example, in 1934, Clark Gable took off his shirt in, this film called It Happened One Night. And you know what happened? No, ladies didn't go crazy. T-shirt sales went down. He wasn't wearing an undershirt. And before that, all men wore undershirts. And so Clark Gable doesn't wear an undershirt. I don't have to wear an undershirt. There you go. Bambi came out, and the hunting industry was devastated the next year. I'm going to kill Bambi's mama. No. Recreational hunting almost died. James Dean, a rebel without a cause, appeared on screen in a red windbreaker. Guess what was the number one male clothing item for sale next year? Red windbreakers. Hey, you recognize this guy? Risky Business, Top Gun. Who is that? You go to movies. Tom Cruise. He saved the Ray-Ban sunglass company. Before that, they were about to go out of business. But his wearing of Ray-Bans, sales skyrocketed. A river runs through. It came out in 1984. The next year, the fly fishing industry increased its revenue by 258%. It's incredible the impact that product placement or kinds of activities in movies can have on a culture. But that's sort of innocent. But not all impact of movies is good. Frankly, you remember when Ronald Reagan was almost killed? He was shot by John Hinckley. Do you know why John Hinckley shot him? He was imitating the movie Taxi Driver. He was fascinated with Jodie Foster, and then he wanted to be like Al Pacino in that movie and shoot a politician. And it almost killed our president. Now, movies, for good or ill, they have power. Stories have power. In fact, this is not a new discovery. Jesus' primary teaching method was story. In fact, Matthew says this: Jesus used stories when he spoke to the people. In fact, he did not tell them anything without using a story. Now, why was Jesus so story-driven in his teaching style? It's because stories, I think, open our eyes. They help us to see things that we didn't see before. Jesus was a master teacher, and today he wants to open our eyes. And that's sort of the echo of the film industry. D.W. Griffith, again, the creator of The Birth of a Nation and the inventor, the father of Hollywood, said as a filmmaker, here was his goal. The task I'm trying to achieve above all is to open your eyes, to help you see. And so today, that's our goal. We want to open our eyes to reality. We're on a quest for truth because, after all, Jesus said, you'll know the truth, and what? Truth will set you free. It'll change your life for the better. So today, we want to open our eyes, and I want to open our eyes about an issue that touches every one of us in this room, touches us deeply. There's no escaping it, because this is This is a story today about a universal human problem, and that problem is pain. You ever hurt? Do you ever struggle? Has grief ever come upon you? Have you ever been in a hard spot or gone through a trial, or maybe it's been a physical illness or an emotional illness, or maybe it's a relational breakdown? I mean, human beings suffer. Suffering is real, and it comes to us in a variety of ways. Now, today, we're going to look at two pain stories. One comes from the life of Jesus. It was recorded in Mark's biography, chapter 5, and it's the story that's told by Peter. Actually, he was there. He was an eyewitness. The second is our film story. But in Mark chapter 5, we see Jesus walking for about an hour and a half, and he encounters pain. I want you to listen to the story and see if you can identify some of the pain points that Jesus just stepped into in an ordinary day. Mark 5, beginning at verse 22. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and he pleaded earnestly with him, "Jesus, my little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she can be healed and live." So Jesus did. He went with him. Now, a large crowd was gathered there, and they were pressing around Jesus. It was hard to move. And there was a woman there who had been subject to continual bleeding for 12 years. It was awful. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many physicians and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she got what? Worse. She heard about Jesus. She went looking for him. She found him in the crowd, and she reached out and touched him. And immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. And Jesus turned around to see who had touched him. Who touched me? And the woman came and fell down at his feet with fear and trembling and told him the truth. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? Overhearing what they said, Jesus told them, "Don't be afraid. He's Jairus, just believe." When they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw commotion with people crying and wailing. The whole community was devastated. And he went in and said to them, "What's this commotion? Why all this wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. They knew death when they saw it. After he put them all out, the child's father, mother, the disciples went in with him, and they went to where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum." Literally, that's Aramaic. It means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Now, because this is quoted in Aramaic, we can be sure this is an eyewitness account, the thing Jesus actually said. And immediately this girl stood up and walked around. She was 12 years old. And at this, they were completely amazed. I guess so. Now, what do you think this episode took? An hour and a half, 2 hours? I mean, not that long. But think of all the pain points Jesus encountered in this short period of time. I mean, here's some I noticed. Maybe you saw these. In about an hour, Jesus encountered the acute illness of a child. That's a pain point. He encountered the pain of the parents who were grieving and suffering over their sick child. I mean, that's something we don't often think about. We suffer when the people we love suffer. Another pain point was the death of that child. She really was dead. Her spirit had left her body, Luke says. He encountered the fragility of a woman who'd for 12 years struggled with chronic illness. And she'd also been under the malpractice of abusive caregivers who made her worse instead of better. And if you've dealt with long-term illness, you know that sometimes there's deep financial pain, financial stress in dealing with long-term illness. That's all on display in this passage. I mean, you look at it and it becomes obvious. Suffering is inevitable. That's the Bible. Now let's meet a man called Otto. In this story, suffering is also on display. Otto, the main character, goes through an avalanche of suffering. And when he does, you realize quickly that suffering has consequence. Let me tell you something about the pain in your life. It will never leave you the same. Suffering always changes us. Now, it'll make you better or it'll make you worse. It'll make you harder or it'll make you more tender. It'll open you up or it'll close you down. But pain will never leave you alone. It will never leave you the same. It is inevitable. It comes like a tsunami. And when it washes over you, it will transform you. What will it do in your life? Now let's meet Otto. He's suffering. He's gone through a lot of pain. More on that in a moment. But Otto is so devastated by his pain, he's making a choice. His pain has made him bitter and hopeless, not better and hopeful. And so he's going to end his life. He's attempting suicide when he looks out the window of his living room and he noticed the commotion out on the street. Now, Otto's sort of the neighborhood watchdog, the neighborhood busybody, really. He knows everything about everybody, and when he sees this commotion, it distresses him. What's going on in his neighborhood? So rather than complete his suicide, he goes out to help this couple, Tommy and Marisol, who are moving in with their kids. And Tommy's rented a trailer, but he doesn't know how to back up or drive a trailer. And Otto's just frustrated because he looks at all that's going on and he says, "What idiots." And finally, he can't take it anymore. He'd rather help than die. And so he goes out to intervene and park the car.
So you're probably wondering why you're not seeing the video clip right now. Well, that's because copyright law prohibits us from actually showing these clips online. So we'd love to invite you to join us in person for the rest of this series. In this first clip, new neighbors Tommy and Marisol are parking into their new house. Tommy is attempting to parallel park a U-Haul in front of the street, which ends up being a little bit of a disaster because Tommy ends up kind of jumping the curb. Otto comes out of his house, starts freaking out, asking him what's going on. Otto screams at Tommy, "Get out of the car, I'm gonna park it for you, just get out." Basically calling him an idiot, saying how dumb he is for not knowing how to park a trailer. He shuts the window, so just kind of ignoring Tommy and Marisol. Turns around to start backing up the car, and he sees two small young girls. He immediately kind of shuts up and just kind of becomes more serious. He didn't mean to be rude in front of all these kids.
And Otto's
so it kind of shocks him, and he becomes more softly spoken and exchanges some pleasantries with the kids.
He's a grumpy old man. Do you know anybody like that? Maybe when you look in the mirror, I don't know. I mean, there are issues in life that come to plague us, and Otto is just overwhelmed with the tsunami of suffering that has invaded his life. He has a reputation for being a grump, and it's well earned. He's picking at everybody around him. He's irritated. His favorite word is idiot, idiot, idiot. And so Tommy and Marisol move in. They get some help in parking their trailer, and they decide to express some gratitude and thank and meet their new neighbor. But Otto is not much better.
In clip 2, Tommy and Marisol kind of knock on Otto's door. Otto opens the door and is kind of confused at why they're there. All three of them have a little bit of a dialogue about Otto's name. Marisol calls Otto Otto, which kind of annoys Otto. He's just kind of frustrated in general about why the two are there. Marisol actually brings Otto food as a sign of welcome. As a surprise. She says that she wanted to get to know Otto a little bit, to say hello since they're going to be neighbors. Otto kind of just takes the food and slams the door in her face, but Marisol puts her foot in the door, kind of kicking it open, so basically saying, "Hey, I'm not done talking to you." The two introduce themselves, say their names, and Otto really doesn't show any sorts of emotion towards them. Marisol kind of picks up on this and says, "Are you always this unfriendly?" To which Otto violently denies, "No, I'm not unfriendly," kind of showing, yes, he is unfriendly, of course. Marisol sarcastically replies, "Oh no, you're not unfriendly. Every word you say is like a warm cuddle." Marisol then kind of goes into a backstory of where she's from. She talks about her heritage, to which Otto doesn't really pay much attention to, and Tommy ends the scene by saying, I'm an IT consultant, in very stark contrast to Marisol's long story. All right, back to you, Jeff.
Otto is filled with grief and pain, and he lashes out at everyone around him. I mean, why? 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 Is the question, isn't it? Why is he this way? It's because he's suffering so much. He's under an avalanche of suffering, we discover as this film rolls on. And suffering comes at us from many sources. Now, in a series of flashback moments in this film, we see many of Otto's pain points in his life. And I'm just going to list them up here. And I want you to look at these pain points because maybe you're experiencing some of that same pain in your life. And you're wondering, what do I do with this? How do I handle this? Otto's suffering came from childhood trauma. His parents both died when he was young. He had long-term personal illness, a heart condition that plagued him, kept him out of the military. He had extended joblessness as a young person. You know how troubling that can be. He suffered the death of an unborn child, a true, deeply wounding trauma. He had acute disability and illness in his wife, and he knew the pain of being a long-term caregiver in a hard situation. He saw his wife suffer, and he could do nothing. It made him angry, and then she died. And that trauma rocked his world, caused him to want to end his own life. He experienced conflict in the neighborhood among all the neighbors because he became so irritable. And he had a decades-long dispute with his best friend that robbed him of companionship. As an old man, we see him lose his job because he's kicked to the curb. He's put out to pasture. There's no meaning. And then there's the grief and the depression and the loneliness that was just part of the package of his life. Do you see yourself there in any of those things? Any of your experiences? I mean, listen, suffering is going to come your way. It is inevitable. There must be 1,000 ways the props can be knocked right out from under us and we can hurt. The question is not, will we hurt? The question is, what do we do when we hurt? What do we do with our suffering? Now, for years, Otto's method of dealing with it was anger, frustration, ultimately withdrawal. He pulled away from others. Is that the best choice? No. In fact, Otto begins to change because Marisol won't leave him alone. She reaches out, she engages, and Otto begins to discover that he's not alone. People do see his pain. They care about his pain. They want to help in his pain. And so he begins to change.
Otto approaches Marisol's door in a hurry and asks to use her phone, saying that his phone has been disconnected. Marisol begins to yell at Otto for not telling her what happened to him on the street and isolating himself from her. She says that Otto scared her. She was worried about him and whatever episode he was going through, but Otto was just unwilling to accept any help. She really thought something bad was going to happen to him, and she felt powerless to help. She also convicts Otto for leaving her outside waiting for him. Marisol says that Otto cannot use her phone and slams the door in his face, only to be opened up pretty much immediately afterward, saying to him, "You think your life is so hard because everybody is an idiot and you have to do everything on your own, right? But guess what? You can't. You should be happy someone was trying to help you, even if they're an idiot." Her words really seem to convict him.
Wow. What changed Otto? Marisol and her love. Marisol and her family who reach out and wrap their arms around this grumpy old man and help him to see that he is not alone. And something amazing happens. Otto changes. Otto begins to grow. So when you're in difficulty, when you're suffering, when pain is part of your package, what do? Well, let me suggest this. How about grow like Otto? Don't stay where you are. Don't stay in your isolation, your loneliness, your bitterness, but open the door of your heart and let people in. In fact, I want to finish today by challenging you with 3 choices you can make when you're hurting. 3 great choices in the face of our pain that will deliver us, that will bless us, that will transform us. Things that we can do with our pain that are proactive and positive, and that will produce good outcomes in our life. We see them on display in the Bible, and we see them on display in this story. Choice number 1 is this. Choose to be part of a loving community. We don't do well alone. Otto began to change when people began to embrace him, and he began to love them back. Community is powerful. Pain shared is pain lessened. Joy shared is joy increased. In fact, when we encourage one another, love one another, provoke one another, we lift one another up, what happens? When we help one another, things get better. The wisest man who ever lived, Solomon, spoke about the power of community, the power of friendship when he said this, as iron sharpens iron. I mean, there's some friction in that, isn't there? When you rub up against another person, one person sharpens another. We need each other. It's in relationships that we grow, that we get better. So today, if you're hurting, the temptation will be to pull away from others. It's the worst thing you could possibly do. We need companionship. We need connection. We need human touch. We need interaction. We need people who will love us in spite of our difficulty and tell us the truth when we're living an illusion. Choose to live in loving community. Otto comes to realize that the real idiot in the story is himself. He's been an idiot because he's pulled away from people that care about him, including his best friend from whom he's been estranged for 20 years. But Otto wants to change that. His best friend's had a stroke. He's not in good condition, but Otto comes to make peace.
So Otto comes over to Ruben's house, and he's greeted by Ruben's wife, Anita. Otto asks for any legal documentation, including notices, letters, power of attorney, and any other records of her and Ruben's conditions. Anita's kind of surprised that Otto knows so much about the medical conditions they both have, but she does agree to let Otto help. Otto comes inside and walks up to Ruben, saying, "I've been an idiot." Previously in the film, Otto has kind of pushed aside Ruben. Otto tells Ruben that he was so wrapped up in his own troubles that he had completely stopped thinking about anyone else, and that friends shouldn't do that. It isn't easy for him to say, but he then says, "I'm sorry." Ruben blinks in acknowledgement, which is the most we've really seen from him as far as reacting to anything. Otto ends by saying that he's going to fix this, dedicating himself to helping out this family and being a true friend again.
I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. I withdrew. I pulled back, and it was wrong. We need one another in community. In fact, one of the big lessons of the Bible, one of the big lessons of this film story is simply this. As disciples, we connect. I mean, this is what disciples do. We connect in community. We find one another. We give strength, hope, and love, encouragement to one another, and we do it in connection and community. I mean, community matters more than you can possibly realize, and that's why I'm grateful for our faith community. I'm grateful to be part of the family of God with you. We help one another in a community like this. In fact, together we carry loads together, don't we? We love together. Carry one another's burdens, and in this way you'll fulfill the law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? It's the law of love. It's the law of love. Jesus said if you want to be identified as my disciple, love one another. Love God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. This is our ambition. This is our purpose. In fact, this is what transformed Otto. In community, he rediscovered the power of love. He rediscovered the purpose of love. Otto realizes he has something to give to the people around him. He begins to love others again. He begins to move beyond his own selfishness. He learns to look outward and not just inward. Otto reconnects with people. He rediscovers the power of purpose, and he is a changed man. And that change is awesome to behold. He becomes genuinely helpful, and he starts giving himself away like this.
Otto is working on fixing up a car with the help of Jimmy and Malcolm. After they finish, Otto hands Malcolm the paperwork and keys to the car, saying, "It's your car." Malcolm is extremely happy and hugs Otto. Afterwards, Otto pulls up to Marisol's house with a new truck, which excites her and the kids. Otto invites the whole family to come in the truck and take a ride with him. The kids kind of get on board, they are laughing, they're admiring the truck, Marisol's happy, and seeing all of this, Otto looks at Marisol, smiles, and says, "This is living."
Otto learns that the purpose of life, that real living is to love the people around you. Whether it's the neighborhood misfit that he provides housing and gives a car, or the oddball neighbor who's always marching around doing stupid stuff, or Marisol and her families. He loves them so much that he becomes dear to them. They call him Abuelo Otto, Grandpa Otto. He becomes part of the family because he started looking outward, not inward. He started giving himself away, and there's power. The happiest people I know are the most unselfish people I know. The most miserable people I know are the most selfish people I know. Which are you? In fact, Jesus set the example for us, who didn't hang on to anything that was his divine prerogative, but he emptied himself and became a servant and died for us on the cross. And it's in light of that example that Paul wrote to the Philippians, and the Spirit says to us, don't merely look out for your own interests. Don't just be selfish, but also care about others, engage in helping others, love others, pursue their best interest as well. Wow, what a transformative behavior for Otto. He starts helping everybody, giving himself away in every way he can. And one day, on one of his caregiving missions, Otto's heart plagues him. He has a heart attack. He ends up in the hospital. Marisol comes to see him. In fact, Otto surprises her because he lists her as his next of kin. And she discovers something about Otto.
In this clip, Otto is in the hospital, and Marisol has come to visit him. A doctor comes in and tells Marisol that Otto has named her his next of kin, showing that really Otto truly does have no one in his life, no family, no other friends besides this person he just met recently. The doctor asks if Otto has told Marisol about his health conditions, to which Marisol kind of pauses and says no. The doctor says that he has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, which means that his heart is too big. And Marisol kind of gets a kick out of this. She starts to giggle and then starts outright laughing. It's humorous to her because of the lack of heart that Otto has shown her throughout the movie. So it's just funny to think that he has a heart that's too big. Marisol then turns to Otto and says, "You're really bad at dying," which causes Otto to chuckle a little bit.
Otto's really bad at dying, but he became really good at living because he discovered that a life invested in loving is a life worth living. Let love be your noble purpose when you're hurting. Don't be self-absorbed. In spite of your pain, look outward and give yourself away. And there's one final choice that we all need to make in the face of our pain, and that is to pursue a loving God and connect with Him. Now, there are plenty of pain stories in the Bible. We could spend all day looking at them. In fact, at the end of this month, we're going to start a new series called Weeds in My Garden, and we're going to look at some emotional pain issues and how we can deal with them. Hope you'll be part of that starting on July 29th. But when you look at the Bible, you quickly see that pain is everywhere, including in some of the chief characters of the Bible, like, for example, David. David had plenty of pain in his life. Do you know there's a time when Saul tried to kill him and he had to flee the country? He ran to his enemies, the Philistines. They wanted to kill him too, so he had to pretend to be mentally ill. He was drooling on his beard. And yet, in spite of that suffering, in spite of that anguish and pain and turmoil, David learned something about God, because while he was drooling, he was writing Psalm 34. And here's what he concluded: the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and He saves those who are crushed in spirit. So if you have a broken heart today, if your spirit is wounded, bruised, crushed, please know you're not alone. And if you seek the Lord, He will bless you. He will save you. He will come near and be with you. When we step back into Mark chapter 5, we see Jesus dealing with hurting people. I mean, there is a desperately ill young girl who needs Him, and a sick woman who seeks Him. Why? Because Jesus can help. Do you realize that pain was not God's intention? He didn't create suffering in this world. We brought that on ourselves by our own rebellion. In fact, God didn't create a world of pain, and God is going to correct the pain in this world and eliminate it. Here's what Revelation 2:14 says about the end of the age. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, no more mourning or crying or pain. The old order of things is gone. Everything is new. Now, God is going to eliminate all pain from our lives. But He hasn't done it yet. And that raises a question. Why do horrible things continue to happen? And they do. From the time you walked onto this campus till now, 5 children have been killed by abuse. From the time you walked onto this campus till now, tens of thousands of people have been severely injured in accidents around the world. From the time you walked onto this campus till now, 80,000 people have died somewhere on this planet. I mean, there's a tsunami of suffering out there. And if God does not intend for the world to end in suffering, if God's going to set all things right, why not now? Why does He let horrible things continue? Now, I'm not sure I can answer that question. I don't know what the answer is, but I absolutely can tell you I know what the answer is not. Because I see it on display in Mark 5. I don't know why God allows horrible things to continue, but I know what the answer is not. It's not because He doesn't love you. He does love you. Walk with Him through Mark 5, and what do you see? A woman who is so broken, and He reaches out with compassion and says, daughter. He treats her like family. It's a family term, an affection term. Daughter, your suffering is at an end. Go and be filled with peace. And you know what? It had to be frustrating for Jairus, right? I mean, here's his daughter, critically ill. She's about to die. In fact, she does die. And Jesus is dilly-dallying. Here's a woman who's been sick for 12 years. She could wait another hour. That girl didn't have an hour. She was gone. And what happens? I mean, this is what perplexes us about God, isn't it? I mean, why doesn't God act the way we think He should? Take care of the critical need first, Jesus, and He doesn't do that. But here's what He does do. He walks into that room, and He says, Talitha cum, little girl, I say to you, get up. That's the literal translation. Talitha is a diminutive of girl. It's a little girl, but Talitha in Aramaic is also a term of endearment. It's better translated, sweetheart. And I want you to picture this. Jesus sits down on the bed. And he takes that little girl by the hand. And like a mother might say to a child in the morning, sweetheart, it's time to get up. And he reaches through death and he pulls her back to life. That's my Jesus. That's how much he loves. He loves every one of us with an everlasting love. So don't you ever think pain comes because God doesn't love us. He does. And someday he'll reach through death, and if we're holding his hand, he'll pull us back to life. But we don't have to wait to the end of the age. If you are suffering today, take hold of the hand of Jesus and let him pull you to life. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we come before you just thanking you that when we hurt, you notice. God, when we suffer, you care. Lord, how do I know that? You entered into our suffering. You didn't have to do it. God, you became one of us. And all the pain that we experience, you experienced. And God, you raised that little girl back to life. How could that happen, God? It's because you died in our place. You took our punishment. Mine too, Lord. And we can live because you died. She was lifted up because you were willing to go down. And Lord, today I pray, help us to lean hard into your love. In spite of our pain, God, help us to lean hard into your love and connect with you deeply. God, take us by the hand and gently lift us to life. Thank you, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. In a moment, you're going to see some baptisms. God taking people by the hand and lifting them to life. And if you want to take God by the hand, and just come and see us in the lobby or see one of the prayer partners.